Today's guest is ELSPETH MERRY. ELSPETH is an award-winning publicist who's managed campaigns for breakthrough artists including FLO and Holly Humberstone to global superstars including Sigrid, Glass Animals, Malone and Ariana Grande, to name a few. Her client roster is insane. What makes ELSPETH incredibly successful, I think, is her knack of knowing how to connect and tell us her artists' unique stories in a way that is true and authentic, but also creatively serves their music in an ever-changing media landscape. I genuinely love all of the artists ELSPETH works with, so to be able to meet and speak to the woman behind them is a big deal for me. Her career is incredible in terms of its trajectory and just so inspiring, and I also think she is just really very, very cool. ELSPETH, thank you so much for being a guest on the Every Muse podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. I was like, who's that girl? I don't know her. Oh, it's me.
Good. I'm glad. Let's start at the beginning. What were you like as a child growing up in London?
Gosh. Well, there's childhood and adolescence. And childhood, I was very shy, believe it or not. And I wouldn't talk to adults. If I'd go to a friend's house, I'd have to ask my friend to ask the adult for water. So like extremely shy. And my parents were a bit worried and they took me to like a child psychologist, and she just said, as long as she's talking to kids, she's fine. So the fact that I am a publicist now is quite insane because I think I was always just in the background. But I guess in terms of working with musicians, I am in the background and I love that. And I'm there to be their protector. I really feel that. But yeah, and I think when I was 10, my parents divorced, and that was really formative for me because that's when I started to write. It was the first time I put my thoughts and feelings down on the page and just tried to make sense of it all. And that started, I think, my love of the written word and like self-therapizing from a very early age. And growing up in London during my teens, there was 5 of us, the 5 girls. We were called the Youngers, and we kind of grew up too quickly. I think when you're living in inner city London, in Lewisham, we saw everything from a very early age and had this love of a particular indie group. And it's funny because my friend has dug out a book that I created of all of those times. So I'd always been obsessed with documenting things. And I really haven't changed. I was like so obsessive over music and boys. And I made her this whole book and documented the journey with like this group that we went to every one of their shows. We were too young to get in. That's why we were called the Youngers. We would just like follow them around Southeast London. And we were just fans and we loved the music. And I think that really started this like beautiful fandom. Also obsession. I think back then I became obsessed with the music, but also obsessed with the idea that I didn't just want to be a band-aid, a groupie, a girlfriend. I wanted to work with the artists on stage. And my friend Amana, shout out, reminded me this week I went to Latitude Festival and I had Sigrid headline the second stage. It was a huge moment for her and us. I've worked with her for 8 years, and it's the first time Amana's seen her, and I've known Amana since I was 11, and she was like, it's so cool that you were a massive fan of Avril Lavigne, huge fan. And now you're working with an artist who kind of represents that like defiant kind of anti-pop star. And when she said that, I felt really emotional because I felt really proud. And I was like, God, that like 11-year-old girl would be so proud right now watching me watch this artist who I've helped grow her story and been there with her through all of these firsts. So sorry, that's a very long-winded answer to that question, but that's, kind of growing up in London and being exposed to music from a really young age. And also my parents, my mum was a salsa teacher. She had a salsa club. And I did the door when I was 14 at her salsa club. And she paid me £10 an hour, which is so good.
That's such a good rate.
So I had £45 a week.
Mum.
£45 a week to go and spend on like a Topshop top.
So cute.
Some Glen's vodka, maybe some cigarettes at the time. And that was just my pocket money. And my mum would put on these amazing dance extravaganzas at the Rivoli Ballroom in Southeast London, which has become, I mean, it's in many films, many music videos. It's this 1950s ballroom that hasn't changed. And I was exposed to that level of like dancing and performance as well. And then my dad is a Motown head, Northern Soul. So I had a really interesting mix of music at home, and yeah, had a love of, I guess, like rhythm and music too. I did Irish dancing for 10 years. So I mean, I hung up my Irish dancing boots when I was 15 and started going out, and was like, I can't dedicate 4 days a week to doing this dancing, but it's still in there. This like love of the music. That's why at 5 years old, I was like, I'm going to do Irish dancing. The Irish music, there was something about it. So
what strikes me about all of that is like following your obsession. And if you hadn't been so obsessed and hadn't like tapped into it, because we all get obsessed with weird things, right?
Yeah.
But so many of us are like, oh, it's just this weird thing that I really like. Not that music is a weird thing, but I'm just saying like the obsession part of it is so important to recognize. Actually, I'm obsessed with this for a reason.
Yeah.
It really is so, it consumes me, and that's actually where I should be going.
Absolutely. I think it's the kind of melody and the sonics, and then also the lyrics totally. When you feel like a musician kind of climbs into your head and tells you who you are and how you feel and understands you, it's like very, very powerful. And I went to Reading Festival when I was too young. It's like the festival you go when you've just got your GCSE
Yeah, I remember
results.
Reading. Yeah.
Yes. And the kids go wild. And we were 14, 15, and I think Foals were headlining, Panic at the Disco days, just like pure indie sleaze. There's a BBC Sounds podcast on indie sleaze that I just started this morning. And again, it was like MySpace Top 8, just this like grotty scene that was a reaction to Coldplay being like very clean pop. And we just, at a very young age, just fell in love with indie music. And fell in love with the written word. And as I said, like starting that diary was like me starting writing. And at school, I just loved English literature. And actually, it's funny because with university, I actually, my UCAS, and I really loved journalism, but at that specific time, and like you're so young when you have to decide what you want to do, I was obsessed with music, but also fashion. And I had these grand ideas that I was going to be a fashion journalist and work at British Vogue. So I applied for some fashion journalism courses and also some like art courses, but no one told me I needed an art foundation. So I just applied for these courses that I couldn't get into. It was like, I don't know how I messed that up. And my dad was very, like, I listened to my dad a lot, and he was clear that I should stay in London. He was like, if you're doing journalism, why would you go to Bournemouth? You need to be in the city, you need to be working, interning whilst you're doing your degree, and you need to be staying at home so you don't get into debt. And I was like, okay. And I do trust my dad's opinion. And I then ended up getting clearing on a journalism course at LCC, part of University of the Arts London. And I'm really glad that I didn't do fashion journalism and that I didn't specify that early on, that actually doing a course in journalism, I was featured editor of the Arts London News. And during that time was when I think I just was very determined from a very young age and started interning whilst I was at uni. So I interned at Tony and Guy on their PR, in their PR department when I was 16. Then luckily, and it is, your network, I hate saying, like, your network is your net worth, but I had a contact at the Sunday Times and luckily got an internship when I was like 17, and that was just to go in like a few days a week. And that was a Sunday Times style. So that was like fashion cupboard, it was brutal. I was very young and it was brutal. And I think, during that time, I think I realized a few things about journalism and knew that like the kind of music came back into the fore. And I actually started interning at a magazine called 1883 and rose very quickly to be their music editor because I just loved interviewing bands. And I didn't know what I was doing. But I think I was so green and naive and I remember turning up at the Great Escape Festival with one of my best friends, and we just were like, right, who are we going to interview? And we just wrote a list of people, contacted their publicist, and we actually ended up interviewing the Kaiser Chiefs, which at the time was quite crazy. But we were so, we just didn't know what we were doing. But I kind of loved that because there was this, that we didn't care. we didn't care what people thought, and we just did it. And I at that festival, I forget what year it was, but I met so many people in the music industry that year, agents, managers, promoters, publicists, all these jobs that I had no idea they existed. I had no idea that a musician had this network of people around them, like pushing them and helping them tell their story and helping them get on the radio. I just didn't know that was a reality. And I thought, how is that a job? That sounds so fun.
Yeah.
And so that festival really changed a lot for me, because that's when I realized that publicity was a really important part of an artist's team. And being a journalist, I was very purist. I was like, I'm not going to be a publicist. But then suddenly I realized actually being part of the development of an artist's story is way more interesting to me than only speaking to them for 30 minutes and writing about it. I wanted to be part of that development. So that's kind of where things really started in music. Yeah. I mean, how old was I? 21, I think? Yeah, 21.
How does music make you feel? Because I know for me, it's such a portal for accessing my feelings. And actually, sometimes I could be walking down the street listening to like the perfect song and almost transport myself into this film about my life. I can, it's so strange, but I think it's just, I'm one of those people that like reaches for a song when I want to figure something out, or if I'm feeling a certain way. I'd love to know how it makes you feel.
It's funny, isn't it? There's like a familiarity when you have these artists that are articulating your emotions in like 3 minutes in a really simple, beautiful way. And I think likewise, when I walked from Liverpool Street to this podcast studio, I was listening to the new Confidence Man and Jade song Gossip, which is this really bratty, like electronic banger. And I was just walking down the street, like in the movie of my life.
Yeah.
Like going to a podcast recording. Yeah, this song, got it. And I think that's the beautiful power of music, that you can be anywhere. You can be on an airplane, you can be at a station, and you can kind of forget your surroundings and escape. And I guess it was a form of escapism for me. Like I would be the one at the back of the bus with the playlist, like coming from my phone. Like before we had iPhones, it was like a BlackBerry, and I would play it on the bus for everyone. And I became obsessed with creating scenes, I think. And I'm really good with creating like an ambiance. And that was always when me and my best friend Emma lived together and we hosted dinner parties. I would hate the cooking. I just cannot cook. And it's not that I can't cook.
I
just
either.
don't.
I don't care to.
I don't care. Exactly. And like, I would rather be reading a book, or I just, the time it takes to prepare something, and then you feed yourself and then it's gone. There's something about it. I'm a creative person, but I'm just not creative when it comes to food.
Yeah.
And so Emma would do the cooking and I would create
the hosting.
I would host. I would do the candles, the playlist. You know, I was really good at setting the table and laying the table and creating the scene. And I think music plays into that, because it can create scenes and change scenes. And I love that. And I think that the power of music festivals, still to this day in my life, it's a place, if I like think of my happiest memories, I have them there, because there's nothing quite like watching your favorite band with your favorite people in this like kind of utopia. It is like an escape from the everyday. And music has that beautiful ability to make people feel seen and heard. And even if it's just an hour at a gig in an evening and you've had a really shit day, and music can take you elsewhere. And I think it brings people together in a way, people from different backgrounds that might not necessarily be in the same space. And I find that really powerful. My boss at Island Records, Shane, who's a legend, he's from Northern Ireland, and he said, you know, during the Troubles, the one thing that brought people together was going to a gig. So politically and religiously, they would be opposed, and they'd be in the venue, dance together, and then they'd come out and be opposed again. And I love that music can create that space, and it's really powerful. And that's why I really love what I do. And I feel very, passionate about that special place music has in like everyone's lives day to day.
Hi everyone. Just a short break to say thank you so much for listening to the episode. I hope you're enjoying it. If you are, please do hit the follow button. It means so much to me and really makes a difference to a new podcast like this one. Also, I would love if you could leave a rating and a review. When you're creating in a vacuum, it's not always apparent whether the episodes are resonating or not, and that's why your feedback is so important to me. It means that I can actually put out episodes that you want and will enjoy. Thanks so much. Back to the episode. So I'd love to know up until the point when you started working as a publicist. So you interned at the Sunday Times.
Yes.
And then it was music journalism. Take me through your career up until, I guess, Island Records?
Up until Island.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. From quite a young age, I was like obsessed with fashion, as I said, as well as music, but kind of looked at body image and I, as someone growing up in like the noughties, and there were trends like size zero, it's something that really affected me because I was always curvier and athletic. And it's interesting because I remember a friend of mine wrote a blog post about when Debenhams put size 12 mannequins into the shop and said that it would promote like unhealthy body image. And I felt really angry by this. And I used that anger to reach out to this organization called All Walks Beyond the Catwalk. Karen Franklin, who was the editor of, fashion editor of ID, she hosted the Clothes Show Live, incredible woman. I just reached out to them saying, I feel really angry at modern beauty standards and I need to write about this. And she was like, come to my house and let's talk about this. And so I started blogging for All Walks Beyond the Catwalk. And they had consulted on Dove commercials. And before body positivity was really like a trend, they were doing the work like over a decade ago. Like, must be, how old was I? Like, I was really young. I was like 17, 18 when I decided that I wanted to blog for this organization. And it was interesting because when I was then at the Sunday Times as an intern, there was this story about a casting director who had been fired from a job for bringing up diversity. She'd said, why are there just white skinny models? And they had fired her, and she told me this. And I was kind of on the news desk and I was like, this is Fashion Week next week. Like, this is a big story. And I was so nervous because I still had that like shy child inside me. I remember like looking at the clock being like, okay, I need to go and pitch this to the news editor by 10 a.m. It was like 1 minute before 10. I was like, okay. And I go to him and I was like, so I'm part of this like organization and there's a casting director that got fired and I think it would be interesting to explore this story. And he was like, sounds great. I'll partner you up with this like real news journalist and if you could investigate. And I remember that day I just sat there and looked at this fashion coalition organization in America who did a lot of work like trying to promote diversity. And we did this huge story before Fashion Week of the lack of diversity at London Fashion Week. And obviously things have changed slightly since, but I remember it was page 3 and my name was on the byline and all the other news journalists in the office were kind of like,
super jealous.
Who the hell is this
Yeah.
young girl who's come in? And because they're all battling it out to have like a page 1, 2, 3 story. And after that, I'll say that I never like broke a story like that again whilst I was interning. But I don't know, it just gave me this fire of like, I needed to report on things that, I needed to expose certain injustices. And I loved that element of it where like, I guess like something creative crosses over with like, what's socially going on. And then after that, I started interning at 1883. And that was just like during the summer. And I wasn't being paid, but I had the privilege that my parents lived in London. So I stayed at my dad's and just went in every day and started, I guess, interviewing artists and just finding that was my niche and that's what I loved and that's what I wanted to do. And from that, then I went to The Great Escape and that's when I met the directors of Inside Out agency and they rep talent, including George Ezra, Lady Gaga. And they were very well established, really like revered publicists. And I got introduced to the directors and they were like, okay, we've got an internship for 3 months, unpaid, but come in. And from that moment, I think I impressed them because I was always trying to find the story and always trying to find a way to make something happen and like realizing that you have to make your own luck. And I don't know why I realized that, but I just did. And I just was very determined working there. And after 3 months, they offered me a job as their assistant. And for 2 years, I was at Inside Out, assisting the directors, learning everything they knew about, bringing on a client, deciding, like listening to the music in the office, doing A&R, which means artist and repertoire, like deciding if we wanted to represent this talent, looking at all the different aspects of their story and the music and whether it fit with what we were trying to do. But I realized whilst I was working there that if I wanted to work with global superstars, the trajectory wasn't to continue working at an agency. I needed to be at a major label. And I do believe, set in serendipity, and I had basically asked around if there was a PR job going at a record label, and there happened to be one at Island Records. The publicist was leaving after 7 years, and there was only 2 publicity roles at the label. But I had a call with Shane, and we got on like a house on fire. My ancestry is Irish, like he's a redhead. We just had a really funny but like really in-depth conversation about music. And he invited me into Ireland to meet him and to discuss the music I loved and like what I'd been doing. And like he offered me the job like kind of on the spot and didn't even show him my CV. I could have been a fraud, but he saw something in me, and maybe he saw that like fire. I remember my first day at Island, I got sat in the corner with this amazing creative director, Charlie Drinkwater. And he was like, so this is the art press corner, like just have a seat. And I wasn't logged into my computer, but I was just like, what is this place? It was incredible. It was, a historic record label, the memorabilia in that office, from U2 to Bob Marley to Amy Winehouse. My boss, Shane, had represented Amy Winehouse and was very close to her. And yeah, you just felt like you were part of this history. And Darkus Bees, who was the president at the time, I really respected him, and he was an excellent leader and saw something in everyone who worked there and would come round during lunch and like sit there and talk to us all, and we were all like the newbies. And you really felt like, I think because I was 24 when I started at Island, everyone who started in that cohort was quite young. We all felt like we were part of something special. And the week after I started, Sigrid signed her record deal. So again, very serendipitous moment. And I got introduced to her. I'll never forget, she was wearing like black eyeliner and one of those like tattoo necklaces, which isn't Sigrid. And we just sat speaking about, her music, where she was from, this tiny town called Ålesund in Norway. And I didn't know much about Norway either at the time, but I knew when she performed in the office, everyone knew there was something special about Sigrid. And that's when everything started and really took shape. And it was the first campaign I led PR on, where I was collaborating really closely with Charlie and sat in the art direction corner and looking at Francesca Allen did the first press photos and looking at his kind of thinking behind everything. And I think the brand of Sigrid, as well as the music and her, was so strong. And the story was so strong that she was from this tiny fishing town with this huge, incredible pop voice. And her first song was Don't Kill My Vibe, which became a feminist anthem. And that story of, male producers disrespecting her was a story I encouraged her to tell. And there was some fear around telling it, but I think we all knew that like people would feel something when they heard that song, that like she was fighting for something, and not to underestimate her. Because I think when you're a woman, well, she was 19, also just small in stature and from like not from the big city, people have assumptions of who you might be. But from the outset, like she knew what she was doing. She knew what she wanted to achieve, incredibly ambitious. And we were just all there, this small team, trying to facilitate, her story, her art. And I think it was one of the most rewarding projects because it was all of our firsts. It's like the first time we had an artist sell out and headline Shepherd's Bush. The first time we had an artist win the BBC Sound Poll, which was chosen by like 170 tastemakers. And it was, I say she didn't win the Brit because she's not British, annoyingly, but she would have won the Rising Star. And it was such an amazing time. And I look back on it with I feel very nostalgic about it and feel really, really grateful that I'm still working with Sigrid after 8 years, which is wild to me.
Yeah.
But that was really my start into press and meeting journalists and going for lunches and telling them why I care about something and building that trust with the media and them kind of trusting me to give the music that I loved. I guess my journalist background came in because I was able to see a good story and hone in on it and write a really good press release and help with biographies. Like, a lot of my job is communicating complex things and making them more simple for people to understand.
Storytelling,
yeah. Exactly. I feel like storytelling has become this like buzzword now for every brand and artist, and it's interesting because it's what publicists have always done. And I think that publicity certainly has been devalued at major record labels, where they've kind of annihilated their like press departments and laid people off and have focused much more on marketing and digital marketing and social media, which is very important, but it's still important to have someone who understands the media and understands messaging and also can have a really deep conversation with an artist, because my job relies on my relationships with musicians and management and us kind of working together. And so, yeah, at Island, I think it was like I realized that I love developing talent, and that's one of the most like fulfilling, rewarding parts of the job. Is like taking someone from, selling 100 tickets at a tiny venue to like Glastonbury, the other stage, playing to 30,000 people, millions at home. That feeling is intoxicating, and I guess it's quite addictive as well. I was having a drink with someone last night, and he was saying like, it's like we're all addicts. I was like, I've never heard that before, where like it's really hard work and it's emotionally grueling. But when something works and there's a song that, gets in the top 10, or, an artist walks a red carpet and wins an award, all of that is so, those things are really rewarding, but it does feel like you're part of this quite intoxicating world. And I think one thing I've tried to do when I started my business was like put better boundaries in place, because boundaries are incredibly hard in this industry, because your job is inherently social and you're out and you're drinking and you're socializing with journalists, and a lot of it is that's why this is an early morning for me, because a lot of it's like staying out.
Sorry.
Very late. Oh no, not at all. It was good. It was like I feel like I'm on a commuter train doing a proper job.
Welcome to how everyone else is living.
I've never felt like I do a proper job. Like I kind of cycled.
How good is that? How good is that?
It is.
Yeah.
It is good that I don't ever dread going into work ever.
You kind of have this misconception of what publicists do from TV shows. You think, oh, there's a crisis, I need my publicist.
Yeah.
And until I was looking into your career, I'm not sure I fully understood the scope of what you did and how it ranged from not just crisis management. It was laying the foundations for someone's story, portraying them in the way that they want to be portrayed and how they deserve to be portrayed and how their music should be received. It involves a lot of alchemy.
Yeah, it does. And it's I kind of describe it now as like it's finding connection points and finding elements of how will your story connect with a wider audience. And it's not just, sending a press release and pitching an idea to a journalist. It's when I took on Hack Baker 3 years ago, who is an incredible East End poet, orator, musician, who stands for his working class community, and he writes protest songs, rebel music. He does, and when I took him on and put this deck together of like what I wanted to do with him, it's like, okay, how do I make journalists at The Guardian understand Hack's message, which maybe wasn't written for certain people, but is a working class story. And a hero story, and to a certain extent we love those stories and we back the underdog. But he had a really similar story in my eyes to the late poet Benjamin Zephaniah, who I grew up reading his poetry at school, and Hack spent time in prison when he was 19 and so did Benjamin, but he found poetry. And Hack won a raffle to play guitar whilst he was in prison, and he kind of stared at this instrument wanting to master it. And kind of he had lessons, and then he said inevitably the teacher never came back, and he just had this guitar with him. And it was such a poignant story, and one that I thought, like, I don't even know if Hack had heard of Benjamin, Zephaniah, and I was like, wouldn't it be great if the two of them could just sit down and talk? And I made it my mission at the start of that campaign to get them to meet. And I saw that Benjamin was doing like a book event, and I took Hack and we sat there and watched him speak. And at the end, we queued up and I was like, I'm buying a book. He's going to sign the book and you're going to talk to him. And I remember they sat next to each other and Benjamin was like, I've heard of you. And I took a picture of them. And he signed books for us and they had a conversation. Benjamin took his number and they started this beautiful conversation. And I think I love being privy or helping make happen like really interesting conversations. And from that, we commissioned this podcast on BBC World Service called Music Life, which sadly is no more. But those episodes were brilliant because it was a round table with like 4 musicians. And we helped Hack curate the lineup. And it was Benjamin, Celeste, Baxter Jury, and Hack. Am I missing another guest? No, I think that was it. And I remember I was getting a flight that day to go on holiday. And I like in the morning went to set Hack up and his laptop broke. And I was like, I need to get my flight. Your laptop's broken. You're meant to be hosting this. And I've got a picture of him in his studio just surrounded by all this mess, like trying to get onto his laptop. And then it finally came on and I had a link to listen to it. So I'm listening to this incredible conversation and the subject was success is seasonal and you have these ups and downs and you never feel like you're living in success when you are successful. And I just remember being at Gatwick Airport, like listening, like watching and listening and being like, this is incredible. And I'm so happy that I had a part to play in this conversation that I think needs to be heard. So when I approach a campaign, I think kind of more like laterally and think like, how do I zoom out of this and how do I make this like culturally relevant and make this conversation that people will want to hear and care about? And I've just taken on a client, Paris Paloma.
I love her. Yes. Oh my God, Labour.
Labour is.
I listened to it. I heard it such a long time ago, and I was like moved by the entire song. When you listen to the lyrics, actually, that was one of the things I was like, I need to talk to her about Paris Paloma. Obsessed.
So I heard Josh Sanger, her manager. I worked with him on Holly Humberstone, and Josh also, I have to shout him out because he saw something in me. Because when I was working at the agency, also, sorry, I'm jumping around a bit, but after Island Records, I was there for 4 years. Pandemic hit. I was going through my Saturn returns. I have a little tattoo too.
Mine was wild too.
To that period, it's like I was living with my fiance at the time. I was working at a corporation, even though it was a record label, it was still a corporation. And I had this moment where I was like, okay, I'm in a relationship I don't want to be in and I need to do something for myself. And I was offered the job as head of press at Inside Out, where I'd interned like 6 years before, and it had felt like this full circle for me. But I realized very quickly that the job wasn't what I wanted. And I think my ego led this decision to be a head of press before I was 30. And I thought, God, this is, what a title. And then when I actually did the work, I was managing a team of 6 and I really struggled. And it was also the pandemic, so we were all struggling. But I realized very quickly that I was working for someone else's dream and company, and it wasn't my name on it. And also, I wasn't doing the creative PR work that I absolutely loved. And I was just so burnt out. After 6 months, my inbox was insane. I was trying to manage a team, but help bring in new business. And I'll admit I struggled and I had a big conversation with the directors and I was like, I actually can't do this anymore. But during my time there, they gave me Holly Humberstone as a client, and for 6 months, we developed her story. And I worked with Josh very closely, and she was this kind of like nymph-like character.
She's great.
From like Grantham, from this like lived in this like crumbling down house. It all sounded like a fairy tale, with three sisters, such an incredible songwriter. And we grew like an amazing relationship of like trust and during those early days. And when I quit Inside Out, she signed to Polydor, and I decided that, yeah, I needed to start The Artist's Way, my company, but I read The Artist's Way, and this is a book that was like incredibly important for me, and it found me at a time when I needed it. A friend of mine, Laurie Belgrave, founder of the Chateau, an amazing community, he was cycling down the street and saw me, and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I'm really struggling with my new job." And he was like, "I've got a book I want to give you." It was meant for my mom, but she's already done it. And it's this 13-week course into creative recovery. And I would recommend anyone that feels they're at a transition in their lives to read it, because it really resets you. And it's had a lot of press recently because Doechii did it when she was going through quite a tough time. And it kind of gave me a lot of answers and confidence that I needed to hear. And I was able to cut out excuses, and it kind of encourages you to be creative again for the delight of it, for the like mystery of it, not mastering a subject, just beginning again.
I love it. I've done it too.
Have
And
you
that's
done
why,
it?
yeah, that's what made me sort of start the podcast, because it
Oh
was
my
something I was just
God.
ruminating on and couldn't, and I did it, and it was so transformative.
Yeah, I think it's so powerful, and it comes with a warning, doesn't it? Like, this book will change your life. And I was like, whatever.
You can't unlearn what you learn.
Absolutely. Like those morning pages of just like getting all the worry and the anxiety. And that was such an anxious time as well. And we were all forced to look inwards and be kind of imprisoned to our flats. And, you know, my one walk a day that I did around the block. And my best friend Emma, we also decided to start a business, Her Hustle, just before the pandemic. Out of this, I think, quarter life crisis. And we're both very ambitious women, and we were both 25. And I remember we were sat having a drink, and we had grown up together. So we had been like the Southeast London girls following boys in bands, met when we were 13. We went to different schools, but we came together at these gigs. And then we kind of like separated for a while. She went to Manchester, I stayed in London, she moved to America, she came back, and we were both thinking, like, how did we get to where we got to with our careers? Like, how? Why are we here? And we got no support post university. A lot of our luck was because we lived in London and had a network and got to meet people. So we decided that we wanted to start a business that would help young women access careers and speak to women who are at mid-level jobs about how they got into it. So with the backing of Universal Music, we hosted our first event on their like 10th floor. And I really appreciate Universal for like seeing something in the business and saying you can have this space. And we put on this phenomenal event and had a panel. And that's also when Emma's an incredible broadcaster and host, but that was where she realized that's what she wanted to do. And I realized I wanted to be in the background very much, but helping facilitate these conversations. And a lot of it was kind of training from doing press, and she was doing journalism. So we made an amazing team, and we put on 6 events, and we tried to kind of bring in all different areas of the creative industry. So we had like an event on the music industry, an event on fashion, food, and we had about 150 women come, young women. We worked with some music charities, like it was like basically trying to find access points for women who didn't traditionally or weren't able to be in London and have these networks. But I remember our last event, we did it with Soho House. It was a huge event. Mahalia headlined. The day after or 2 days after, it was lockdown. And we had this events company, and suddenly we were like, wait a minute, that's all been taken away. Like, how do we pivot and become an online platform, like a community? So we started doing Zoom sessions with our small but beautiful community. And every day we'd be a place for freelancers to come and like work together, even if it was just you were silent on Zoom. And we started hosting webinars as well. And we got a bit of like pre-seed investment, which meant that Emma could do her hustle full time. I was still working at Island Records, but doing it in my spare time. But I think during the pandemic, and we were also best friends living together, running a business, it was a really intense time, and I think we did struggle, and we both, I think, got to a point where we needed to be honest about whether we could continue this business together. And I think Emma, I remember a moment when our other best friend, Rob, who we eventually lived with, came and sat, and we had a whole day talking about music and artists. And I remember she said to me, I never understood why you wouldn't give up music to do Her Hustle full time. And then when I watched you speak about it and watched you kind of in this like amazing flow, she was like, I completely understand. And this is what you need to do. And I think we both had realizations that we needed to do our own thing, and Her Hustle is a part of us and a part of what we do in our foundation, but it's not something that we both could continue. And I think that was important to say. We've created an amazing business, and we met the Her Hustle community. We still have a WhatsApp group, and we still speak to all the women who were part of it, which is amazing. And Emma, actually, she started a platform called Sex Talks, and it's amazing. It was kind of out of a column she was writing for the Stack about her issues around like orgasming in partnered sex, and
Yeah,
she
it's a great
started
show.
sex
Yeah.
therapy. And from that column, she started an entire amazing events business, and now she's writing a book. And Her Hustle was definitely a big part of her and me, and we're still each other's like biggest champions. And we went through a lot together and lived as single women in this flat, like felt like we were living our best Sex and the City lives for a while, even though it was the pandemic.
Yeah.
And yeah, she was my support system and during that time. And I think if I didn't have her, I wouldn't have created Artist's Way too, because
But you're also sort of living the ethos of Her Hustle. I feel like because you're connecting people, you're making things happen, you're showing people like this is how to get things done. You're almost sort of living it, and still you're still
that's a really beautiful way to see it.
displaying
We
it.
are living it, and I think
Yeah.
that just because it's not a business, an operating business, doesn't mean that what Her Hustle stands for doesn't live in us and everything we do.
Yeah.
And even setting up Artist's Way, like setting up a business, even like registering a business to Companies House, finding an accountant, all of that stuff you need to do when you start a business. Like I wasn't taught it,
Yeah.
but with Her Hustle, we learned it. And I remember just starting the business in our like back room and like getting I've never met another Elspeth. And one of the Her Hustle members she was called Elspeth, and she was a graphic designer. She is a graphic designer, and she designed like Artist's Way, like did my brand deck and like helped me with my color palette. And I kind of sent her this Pinterest I had. I'm very inspired by the 70s and kind of particularly 1969. My favorite album is George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. And that era of, I guess, free love and young people coming together. So a lot of my references was that period. But I think like earthy tones, greens, like Artist's Way is definitely, just I have green nails, always like earthy tones, green, orange, blues.
What's your zodiac sign?
Capricorn.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, you're an earth sign.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yes. And the mountain goat. And I really resonate with the mountain goat because I constantly feel like I'm just walking up this mountain. People will join me, but I'll continue walking. Sometimes I don't know where I'm going, but I will continue going up that mountain. And I feel that. And I think the way Emma and I worked together, it was interesting because she's incredibly academic and smart. And it was like me trying to like translate some of these wild ideas we had into like real things. And I'm quite a doer. I'm not an overthinker. I just do. And that's, I think, what makes me a good publicist is I don't overthink things. I pitch things. And a lot of my job is cold pitching ideas. And even now with podcasting being such a huge area, it's like reaching out to new producers. And a lot of my job is just sending a pitch and being confident with it. And I think that helped with running a business and just being like, I've got to crack on and do it.
Do you ever have moments of self-doubt, like setting up the Artist's Way, bringing in clients? Like, was that ever daunting for you? From what I know, it feels like you could do anything and never have those feelings. But I just wonder if you ever had that.
I think sometimes I definitely do have a level of, I don't want to say imposter syndrome, but when I'm in boardrooms and there's a major record label and there's 30 people sat around a table and I have to speak, some of those fears come up or that shyness and anxiety of like, what am I going to say? I need to plan what I say. I'm not someone who can just spiel off something in a meeting. Like, I really need a plan. And I do think that actually, like, the pandemic and being on Zoom, in some ways it didn't help human connection, but in some ways it made me feel more confident because I could set up my camera, I could sit there with my notes, and I
Mm.
could everyone always said, like, you speak very calmly and slowly and we understand what you're saying. But I feel like a duck on water most of the time. Like, underneath I'm like, ah. But I think if I bring on a new client, there's still an element of you have to prove yourself.
Yeah.
And there's an element of also putting a value on what I do. And in terms of financial value, that's really hard. And I really struggled with that at the start. What am I worth?
Mm.
And PR, sometimes, PR fees get cut and you're constantly negotiating your deal with labels and you're putting a price on what you do and what you can deliver. And I think that it's funny because I was speaking to a publicist about this the other day, that we're in publicity, you don't even sometimes have contracts in place with your clients. Like, your revenue stream could be over tomorrow if that client decides that they want to go with someone else. So you don't have much protection. And we were just talking about how can we put some protection in place, even if it's just like 2-3 months period where
Mm.
like this is coming to an end, but we'll still be paid for this, because it's all still done on a relationship. It's not like an artist is signing a record deal with us. They're just trusting us to tell their story, and you have a deal in place with a label who will, continue to pay you for as long as they think you're doing a good job. And I think that's hard because there's a thing, I think, as well with being a publicist, is feeling like you need to be liked and feeling like journalists need to respect and like you, and always asking, what do you think of this artist? Let me know your thoughts. And that's also interesting. And me and Emma just got back from Greece a week ago, and we do this annual trip to Greece, and it's a reset for us. And she was writing her book. I've started writing a book, which I'll speak more about. But I cut my foot on some coral, and she wasn't there, and I tried to call her. She wasn't answering, and there was a woman there, luckily, but I didn't have a plaster, and I was limping. And I text her saying, I might need you to help because I might need a plaster.
I
And
might.
and then I stumbled, and then I didn't realize she was actually on the beach, and I was like, oh my God, Emma, I've cut my foot and I'm bleeding. Would you mind getting me a plaster? And she was like, oh my God, of course not. And went up to our Airbnb and got one. And afterwards she was like, why did you say to me, I might need your help? You should have just said, I need
Help.
your help.
Yeah.
But I think there
I
was
know
this
that.
element of
Yeah.
not, of maybe in what I do, of not kind of always being and I think, I don't want to say this is a women's problem,
It
but
is, though.
being
It's very relatable.
possibly, could you do this? Or perhaps not being blunt and assertive. And I think I've had to teach myself to be that more with my clients and also with journalists. If I'm, if I'm setting up an interview or a photo shoot, of being no, this is what we're doing. So that definitely has become a thing. I think every year I have a word. Last year was protect, and it was protect my time, my emotions, my business, my relationships. And this year, I think I've really struggled with a word, and I think I want the word to just simply be freedom and confidence. And I think to have the confidence to state and say what I mean and how I feel about something, and not to dither on things. And then freedom, I have a business, and because I have a business, it means I don't have to be in an office every day. And I'm part of this amazing creative space called Young. It's a record label, but now it's kind of a co-working space where the people there are amazing, and the record label is amazing, and it's a beautiful community, and we have lunch every day at the same time. Just even having lunch cooked by an in-house chef, really delicious lunch and then you're sat there with a stranger talking to them. It's a really nice way to spend my day. But I'm not in the office all the time, and I want to travel more, and I want to be able to work abroad and still prove that I can do my job. But I think there is also a perception when you're away that people think you're not working. And I think that's something that I'm kind of like figuring out at the moment of people just jokingly like, oh, you're always away. Dua Lipa said this on her British Vogue interview. People are like, you're always away. But I'm just trying to like design my year in a way that like I am working really hard, but I'm also able to step back, even if it's just for a few days.
Yeah.
So it's funny because it's like we're all conditioned to these like very traditional working weeks. And when your week isn't traditional, it's like sometimes it's maddening. It's like I could do anything today. I could this afternoon, like maybe I could work really hard this morning and then go to a gallery and get inspired. Like, yeah, I'm trying to get out of the habit of being like locked into my laptop, but knowing when to close it. Because when you run a business, you can work forever. And I do, and I do find it hard to switch off. And when I was on holiday, I was working. And that just comes with the territory of having a business. It's not like you clock out. But like navigating those things, I find hard. But I'm kind of doing that in real time and learning how to be a boss. I've employed people. I've had to let go of people. I've got a really good publicist with me at the moment, and we're figuring out each other's rhythms and how we work together. But I think one thing I realized, and I think it's important to state, was I didn't want to scale and grow this like huge behemoth PR company. I don't think that would bring me joy. And I think my experience at Inside Out and the stress that gave me of like, they built a big PR company. And I think I witnessed that and I was like, is that what I need or want? And I think I love that I can stay relatively small. I do have 18 clients. There's a lot, but not all in campaign. Have someone, freelancers, to come in and help me. But I think I like the structure as it is now.
Yeah.
But who knows what that will look like in the next 5 years. But I love the freedom that being a freelance publicist affords me. And I think a lot of publicists who were working in like big record labels and they're now freelance, they say they get to do the work they love to do, which is creative PR, and they don't have to deal with all the office politics that they did before, which takes up a lot of your headspace.
There's a lot of trust involved, and not just like you and I guess journalists, but also you and the artist, because essentially they're trusting you with their story and how you tell it.
Yeah.
Is it important for you to like the artists that you work with and like their music and what they stand for and everything about them?
It is important for me. And I think that's why as well, the idea of scaling a PR company when you probably have to take on more clients to be able to afford more staff, but clients that you might not believe in the same way.
Yeah.
I think journalists trust me and trust what I send them. And I do think I have like a pretty good reputation. It's hard to say. Again, that's me. Like, I've got a good reputation. So I think I need to really believe in something, and also to show up to work every day and PR something. If you don't believe in it, it's hard to self-motivate there. And I feel like when I look at my roster, and I've built a roster of incredible storytellers and artists who really stand for something, and it's so personal to every individual artist. I work with an amazing British Sudanese songwriter called The Halfway Kid, and he is a brilliant troubadour folk artist, very Bob Dylan-esque. And he's, his country is at war, and he kind of is dealing with being a musician but being British Sudanese. And I guess he wrote this song that he fell in love, and he got married, and I went to his wedding in Cairo in April. It was one of the most beautiful weddings I've been to, top 2 weddings. And he wrote a song when he was falling in love with his wife about how could I be falling in love when my country's at war? And it was really powerful. And I commissioned an essay with the iPaper about, I guess, music and folk music and folklore and the oral history of Sudan that he's able to continue making with his music. And he has a song called The Immigrant Song. It's excellent. I think it's really resonating right now. And he is an artist. He's also the kindest, most compassionate, lovely person to work with. For me, it was a no-brainer. Even though I started working with him 2 years ago, it was the day after Glastonbury, and his manager called me like, you've got to come to a gig tonight. And I said, there is no way in hell. And then he was like, just listen to this album. It's called If I Don't Come Home, Go to My House and Burn All My Things. I was like, that is an incredible title.
Yeah.
So I was like,
gonna-
okay. I was just like so dead. And I was like, I'm going to go to this gig. And I'm so happy I went, because that's when our working relationship started. And then going back to Paris Paloma, she's a recent client. And I remember when her manager sent me Labour 2 years ago, I think. And I was just like, I'm a fan. As a feminist woman, that song, as we were saying, is like this rallying cry for women. And she did work with another publicist at the time, and I just said, Josh, I'm fine with being a fan, and I'm gonna just watch her career. And then a month or so ago, we had a conversation, and he felt like it was time, and I was like, do you know what? Slow and steady. I'm in the background being like, and a lot of it is the connection I have with an artist and whether we connect on a personal level. So Paris and I met in Brighton and had a coffee and sat down and spoke about her new song, Good Boy, that's coming out next month. And the song is incredibly powerful. It's not a song that's criticizing masculinity or men. It's a song that's saying, we have more in common with you, men, than men at the top and the patriarchy who aren't serving you. And actually, we have more in common. And I think it's going to be a really powerful song. It's out next month. And even yesterday, we were on a Zoom talking about how we launched this song, what podcast we want to do, the story we want to tell. And I felt so galvanized. And I think it's almost like the little girl, the Avril Lavigne fan, knowing that I would work with an artist like Paris. It's like all of my feminist energy and anger. I feel like I'm putting into like her music and career and telling her story. And I feel like if I was an artist, I'd want to be exactly like her. And that's really inspiring to be able to go to work and be like, I'm doing something for women, like, hopefully globally.
Yeah. I
And
remember seeing her on stage. I think she was wearing white, and it was like with like blood stained
yes, the
dress,
bloodstained dress. We were
dress,
talking about that yesterday.
iconic.
Yeah. Yes.
And then I remember listening to the song and just being like, what is this song? Who is this woman? And I remember making my mum listen to it. And she was like, she's just synthesized like decades of feminist literature into a song, like the emotional labor that women do, the kind of unsung soldier in the background. And she was like, this is incredible. And we've just been like playing it in the car.
It's so powerful. And I had that
powerful.
exact reaction. I sent it to my mum immediately. Like, listen to this. What was it? There's a lyric like 24/7 baby machine so you can live out his picket fence dreams. I saw her for the first time. I hadn't actually seen her play at Glastonbury with one of my best friends, Rachel, and we cried.
Yeah.
Because it was so powerful. I can't explain it. She had this song where she said the story was that it was about her grandma, but she realized that her grandma lived in her mom, her sister, her best friend Kate. And I just started welling up because I just thought of my best friends and my grandma's spirit. And she was a very strong woman. She was in the land army. She left home she grew up in Tottenham and literally opened a book and saw Hereford, the countryside, on a map. I was like, I'm going to go there. So she like kept running away from home, and her parents kept coming to collect her and bringing her back. And then they were like, we're not going to bring you back anymore. So she stayed in Hereford, and she just wanted to live, off the land. And my granny, was her husband, my grandfather. I never got to meet him, but I think he served in World War II, and he was older when he met her. She was 19. He was, I think, like in his 30s. She got proposed to on the same day by two men.
I mean, doesn't that tell you everything?
Yeah, it tells you everything about this woman. But she always wore suits and was very free. And like, it's interesting, she loved her grandsons, and she was quite masculine as a granny. And she was just a legend and fought for her family. And I just thought about her and like her spirit living in all of my friends. And it just, me and Rachel just looked at each other and started welling up. And I think, yeah, Paris has this really, really special power, and it's really hard to explain. But I feel really privileged and honored to be working with her. even we were talking about a women's march on the 9th of August, and just, yeah, she's kind of doing everything I would want I do as a woman, but as an artist. So working with her is such a privilege. And similarly with Sigrid, it's what she does for young women and young men and all ages. Like the Sigrid fan, you can't, there isn't one Sigrid fan. She reaches, like, there are lots of like older dads who say the production's amazing, the songwriting's incredible. Like, she's a co-producer on her record, and she was interviewed by The Independent a few weeks ago, and she had this incredible line where the interviewer, Paddy, said, so you're a co-producer, like, how does it feel? And she was like, well, I've been producing my whole career, but this is the first time I've got credit for it. And it was such a powerful line, and I think a statement for her new album moving forward, because she has always fought for her right to be in these spaces and knows that she's an incredible songwriter, can find a hook in anything, and is an amazing performer. Like, she gives everything when she's on that stage. Doesn't have choreographed dancing. She just does it. She's like this ball of energy, and it's infectious, and you can't help, even if you're not a fan of the music, if you watch her perform, you can't help but be happy for her. So I feel like my roster, I feel at the moment, I've also just taken on an artist called Sophia and the Antoinettes, who, when my friend discovered her, he said, you two are twin flames. And even if you don't work together, you just have to meet. And we're both self-proclaimed love addicts and romantics at heart. And I was cycling home when I listened to the music, and I had to stop because, again, she had articulated all these feelings I have about men. And we met, and she was sat there smoking a Vogue cigarette. She's so, like, fabulous. She has this old world glamour of Marilyn Monroe, but kind of meets Lana Del Rey, and she was just writing in her journal.
So intrigued.
I'm so, honestly, I was like, who is this? Who is this woman? And we've, as of last week, we started working together, which I am so excited about. But yeah, it's like there has to be something that I personally can relate to. I think that's just how I work and operate. And Nectar Wood as well was an incredible ray of sunshine soul artist who we met last year, the week before Glastonbury, and she was like, I'm doing this, I'm actually interviewing artists at Glasto, and I'm doing it for Spotify, and, like, do you have any artists I could interview? And I was like, right. And it was the first thing we did together, and she essentially interviewed all my roster. She spoke to Masego, like, at the time, like, Flight, and it was such an amazing baptism of fire. So I think, yeah, there's this, like, personal relationship you inevitably build because you're in social situations with musicians. And there's also a lot of time. I remember so well, like, me and Holly Humberstone have done so much together, and I love her so much. And she, whenever we've been, like, pre-red carpet award show, it's those, like, moments where you're just like, okay, we can do this. And she's like, what am I doing? Who am I? Do I look ridiculous? And it's like, no, you kind of have to be a calming force.
Yeah.
And I remember Emma always saying to me when we did her hustle that she was like, when you're there, just your presence makes me feel like if anything goes wrong, it's going to be okay. And I do feel that with my artists. It's that thing of, like, just being that safe space for them and being protective, and you just have their back. And if anything does go wrong, you're there. And I think you need that because, you know, often you're very young and you're going into this adult world, and yeah, suddenly it's like everything you say is out there can be misconstrued. And I think it's really hard at the moment as you're an artist to say what you, not to say what you mean, but to not be afraid to say what you mean, because, you know, the media is just constantly changing, and now it's just snippets of things and clickbait. And I think it's hard, especially when you get bigger, to even want to do press anymore, because you're like, they're out to get me. They want a headline. And I do still believe in the power of, like, you know, one interview, one big piece can change people's perception on an artist. And I'm always looking for those pieces that tell the story in the best way possible, that's most representative of the artist. And whether that's the artist writing an essay about a song and being able to pitch that in somewhere. I love doing that because it's like putting artists to task and like actually writing themselves.
I was just going to say, you were speaking so eloquently about they're thrust into this adult world and how difficult it must be for the artist. It strikes me that you are kind of their guard. And like, I'm
Yeah.
wondering who guards the guard? Like, like, because you also are kind of navigating that. And
Who guards the guard?
yeah,
God.
like
I've
how,
never ever thought that.
because you're
I
also
think
like, it's tricky for you, I feel, as well. Like, there's a lot of pressure on you to tell the story because it's their story, but they've trusted you with it.
yeah, I think it's just I gotta say, like, my friends, particularly my female friendships, like, they are the ones, they are my constants. Emma, Rachel, my girls from secondary school, Dorothy, Amana, Ellie, Caitlin, Sequoia. Sorry, now I feel like shout out to all the girls. But they, if anything goes wrong, they're there and they have my back, and I can talk through anything with them. And yeah, I think that they're the ones who get me through. And just I think I'm constantly trying not to act out of like emotion and anger in situations, because it can be very emotional in music and you have an emotional connection to the teams, to the artists. So if things aren't going your way, it can really like get you down.
Yeah.
And I think that having, even if it's like a simple voice note, also having Young space, like the friendships I've made, Chloe Roberts, who's the MD of Young, whenever there's a problem, we'll go for a coffee. And she's not my boss, and actually that's why our relationship's so special, because she's also like, we're twin flames. She's got red hair. She's like, I think she's
Redheads
like
unite.
20 years, yeah, 20 years older than me. And it's kind of, we have a similar like spirit. There's an inner child in there, but like we also don't take life too seriously. And she's there to help me through. And the producer, Quez Darko, he's now left Young Space. But if anything was a problem, I just had those people to like go to. And I think that's important. And of course my family, but in a work capacity, it is hard because you don't have that director. You don't have that. I don't have a career coach. I don't have someone who I can like soundboard with. But I could be better at that. And I think there are a whole network of publicists. Yeah, we're competing against each other for column inches. But Shane is still my mentor to this day. And he is the voice of reason with everything. Like any campaign that something happens, or like crisis management is very real. He's been there, done that, and seen it all. So he was always that person for me and is still. Susie Ember, who was head of press at Polydor and has recently gone freelance, and she's independent, and we have a beautiful relationship. So yeah, I think it's, yeah, I've got those mentors, but it is tough because you kind of have to, yeah, you're constantly like learning new things every day, trying to find solutions, being your own cheerleader. But also my artists are my cheerleaders as well. God, I
Feels like
yeah,
you're friends.
we are, and they are, and I think it's hard. I think when there is a friendship and that you stop working together and you have to try and find your way back to each other as friends. And that's happened with a few bands I've worked with recently. But interestingly, in January, I stopped working with a band who I'd worked with for about 8 years, and they were, the singer was one of my best friends, and I felt really blindsided. And we had a discussion. It was really difficult. But I think sometimes you don't see eye to eye on certain things, or it's history that keeps you together. And I think with music as well, there isn't like a finite, it almost feels infinite. There isn't this end point. It's almost like the end point is when someone decides not to work with the other person, or they stop making music, or you stop doing your job. Like it's kind of consistent over many years. I think that's really hard, but it's interesting because when that all happened and it did feel like a divorce and it felt like a breakup, and it was hard to process my emotions because it felt like I'd lost a friendship and also a band who I loved and like listened to constantly. It propelled me. So I've got this like shadow artist, a term from the artist way of like when you a pushing artist because you've got this artist inside you, but you're afraid of them and you don't feel good enough. I think women, particularly if they're not the best at something, they won't pursue it. Whereas men can be the worst at something and they'll be like, I'm fucking amazing at this. Like, I have been writing since I was 10 and did journalism, and I've been writing artist stories and artist quotes for a decade now. And I've been in the background writing my own story, and I've got 5,000 notes in my phone and like observations of everything. And I'm obsessed with documenting. And after that happened, it's like, do you know what? I've been like helping facilitate and promote this person's creativity for almost a decade. And I haven't done that with my own. I haven't facilitated my creative growth. Every year I write, you're going to write this year. And something just happened and clicked in my head. And I was like, there was this brief, Fitzcarraldo, who are a brilliant publisher, and I'm obsessed with a lot of their books, and Annie Arnaud in particular, a feminist writer. And they had this, they were essentially like, pitch a 25,000 word essay. And this was the deadline. And it's the first time I've ever had a deadline in my head. And before I bought my flat last year, and again, doing it on my own was incredibly difficult, but being financially independent and not owning property with a man, that again was one of my goals, and I achieved it, which was amazing. But sorry, I've lost my train of thought now. The book. Yes, I had to move back in with my mum for 3 months, and I found that really hard. And it felt like all of these teenage thoughts came to the fore, and I was reflecting on my life and my decisions and my mum's life and her decisions. And during those 3 months, I started, like writing and reflecting. And then when I had this brief, I was like, I'm going to start it. And I was at a bus stop and I texted a friend and I was like, God, I feel like I have like sideways roots. And he was like a banyan tree, a red banyan tree, because you've got red hair. And like after an eventful life, like the kind of roots grow out of the branches and go back into the soil. And I loved it as this metaphor for this like kind of, I don't even want to say unconventional life, but this career I've built where I haven't, I'm 33 now. I'm not engaged. I don't have a child. I'm like very career focused and oriented. I've had many romances and many great loves, and people often come to me for my stories. It's probably another podcast to talk about my relationship history. Yeah. But I started kind of pulling everything together under this title, Like a Red Banyan Tree, and I wrote 5,000 words, and it's part memoir. It's quite auto-fiction. I'm very inspired by writers like Deborah Levy, Octavia Bright.
Yeah.
God,
I can't wait to read this.
Well, I've got deadlines in my head, but it's quite great kind of having my work and doing my job, but having this in the background. And like Julia Cameron of The Artist's Way said, doing it for joy and delight, not putting a huge amount of pressure on to like get a book deal and actually be like living, breathing author. I love collaborating too much. I feel like writers live this very like
singular solo,
lonely, not lonely existence, but like, I do like, locking myself away and having like, I have like quite deep, intense thoughts, but I also love collaborating, and that's why I love music. So I think the two can coexist, and it's just in the background. Who knows when I'll finish it, but I'm trying to set myself some deadlines and write 50,000 words, maybe over the next year, we'll see. But it's all there, it just needs to come out. And it's more something that I need to do for myself and facilitate some creative impulse inside me that's there
to make it happen.
To make it, and I will. Like, I've made this happen.
I have no doubt that you will make it happen, and I'm so excited for you. Can I ask you, because you've sort of referenced incredible artists throughout this entire episode, which I'm going to go and look up if I don't know them already. For the people listening, if they could listen to one song today that you think has had a massive impact on you or could be transformative for them, and that's a lot of pressure, but any song that you think you would love people to listen to.
Oh my goodness. This is so much pressure because I don't want to offend any of my clients if I pick a client.
They're all amazing.
They are all amazing.
Yeah.
I think because we've been talking about it so much, like, I just think Labour, I think it captures the spirit of it, as you said eloquently, like, being a woman, girlhood to womanhood over the past, like, thousands of years. Like, I think it's like what's expected of women and not just the physical labor of what we do. It's the emotional labor. And I think it's a protest song that will continue to live and breathe for a really long time. And that's the thing about this song. I think it has 300 million streams on the main version and 100 million on the cacophony version, which is women who were asked to record the chorus who are angry. And whenever women's rights are repealed and when Roe v. Wade was repealed, the song goes viral again because women make their own videos and they're angry. And I think that song right now, I played it for Emma for the first time when we were in Greece, and she was like, "What is this? Who is this?" I was like, "It's Paris Paloma. I've told you about her." She was like, "Wait a minute." And then she texted me when she got home, like, I'm playing it at home with my boyfriend and I'm forcing him to listen to it. And it does feel like this march. It feels like a march.
I pulled up the lyrics. I was like, read while you listen. So you listen.
Exactly. It's powerful, I think.
It's such a good song.
I think any song with like a feminist slant, like even Don't Kill My Vibe, I go back to that song as well.
Strangers is a great song.
All the time.
Sigrid, my fave.
Strangers. Holly Humberstone's Scarlet about her best friend. That is like still my summer song. And then I think of Hack, and they might not be feminist anthems in every sense of the word, but they're protest songs, they're cries. His song Windrush Baby about his grandma coming to the UK from Jamaica, being missold this dream of like the motherland and arriving and hating it. His mom arriving and deciding to raise a family here. But that song, he did an essay for The Independent, which anyone should go and read. And he calls himself the Free Island Man, a term that I helped coin because he's from the Isle of Dogs. His mom's from Jamaica and his dad's from Grenada. And it's a really powerful piece. And I think, I guess protest music, for want of a better word. And then, Gossip, which I was listening to on the way by Jade and Confidence Man, just for the bratty summer that I'm currently having, going to all the festivals and losing my voice and having lots of fun. So, yeah.
Elspeth, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being a guest today on the podcast. Honestly, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a great conversation. Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please do hit the follow button and leave a rating and review. It makes such a difference, and it personally just means so much to me. Thank you.